and welcome to another Lit Matters. The focus of this video is an Inspector Calls and specifically revision of the context to an Inspector Calls. Okay, it's important in this exam, in any exam, that you know the battle you're in, you know the fight that lies in front of you. So the first rule of war, you've got to know your enemy. So in this context, you've got to be aware that if you're doing Edexcel, the Inspector Calls essay question carries 16 marks just for AO3, just for the context and your use of context. If you're doing AQA, that's still 6 marks out of 30, so it's still 20% for AQA and massive 40% of the marks available for Edexcel just for your use of context. So you've got to know your stuff when it comes to this. Some advice from the recent examiners report that they want to see candidates answering in an exam showing an awareness of not just a simple context of Inspector Calls, but that it's more complicated. It is written and set in different moments in history and the significance of the difference between the two. And they want you to be able to select precise quotations and comment on the effects with precise references where you're able to certain parts of the social, historical or the political context. You are advised, and you must make sure you do this, don't ever bolt on a historical paragraph at the end of your essay and just try and chuck all your history in one place at the end. That's not how to do it. You've got to deal with the context as you go in your developing your explanations in every paragraph. Okay, so I'm going to divide this video up into 4 sections: history, politics, society and characters. I won't read everything from every slide. You can read, hopefully, otherwise you're in the wrong place. You're not going to do very well in this exam. But I won't read everything. You can pause it if it's of use to you. You need to know that Priestley's a political writer. Much of his writing has a political angle to it, and it's controversial, and he wants to communicate strong political ideas. After the Second World War, Priestley helps develop this idea of the welfare state, which was established by the Labour Party then. These are all just little intros. We're going to go into these in much more details. He was acutely aware of Britain becoming a more unequal place as he saw it in the 1930s, and he wanted to speak to the audience of 1946. He wanted to try and transform a few mindsets in the post-war period, and he wanted to get British public of the post-war generation to see the mistakes that the previous generations had made, and to identify where they had gone wrong and the stupidity or the idiocy or the short-sightedness of their political decisions, and judge it in light of morality and the opportunity specifically of 1945. So lots more detail on all of these coming up. Right, to start us off then, the history. Okay, a few specific dates for you that are particularly relevant to an Inspector Calls. The movement for female suffrage, that is for women to get the vote, the votes for women, the suffragettes, is happening for most of the early part of the 1900s. It starts to gain certain momentum around 1908 onwards, where you have mass demonstrations and the slightly more militant campaign that results in women getting the vote in 1918 at the end of the First World War. Inspector Calls is set in 1910 to 1912, not written then, but set then. The action takes place in 1912, but we have these sort of backstories, these kind of flashbacks of Eva's life that go from about 1910 when she was working at Burling's factory. The Titanic goes down in 1912. Emily Davison, one of the suffragettes, throws herself under the King's Horse at the Derby. Perhaps one of the most famous acts of sacrifice or acts of political demonstration. We'll come to that. First World War, of course, 1914 to 18. Women get the vote off the back of that because they've been doing all the jobs back in Britain that the men were doing, and they could drive buses and they could work the fields and they could work in the factories, and it was inescapably obvious to the powers that be that there should be more equal footing for women after the war, not least because they had so few men to do any of the jobs. The establishment was kind of forced into giving women the vote. You had the first Labour government in 1924, and Labour problems and Labour strife with the general strike of 1926. Of course, the Second World War, 39 to 45. Significantly in 1940, in London and other cities around the UK, you had the Blitz. And this is important for Inspector Calls and Burling. after the Second World War, you had the radical Clement Attlee Labour government, and Inspector Calls is written in 1944 to 45, I think first performed in 1946. So try and get your references correct, try and get them really, really precise when you are referring to these moments in history in an exam essay. So to deal with them in turn, of course, the First World War, Berling dismisses the prospects of war, saying fiddlesticks, just because there's some half-civilized blokes in the folks in the Balkans. That doesn't mean there's going to be a war, Eric. Shut up, you're young, you don't know what you're talking about. And of course the audience in 1944 would know how stupid he is. You know, because you know your history, just how stupid he is. So there's an element of dramatic irony here, and Priestley uses this to make Berling look foolish, and wants the audience or the reader to disassociate themselves from his politics. It's of course the first mechanized war, so they really had no idea the level of carnage that was going to unfold. Some of the machines first utilized in the First World War: tanks, gas, aeroplanes, and machine guns. So whereas in slightly older battles it would be on horseback with swords, now you have machine guns that could wipe out an army in a morning. So Berling has no idea what he's talking about, and nor did many of the political class prior to the First World War, or indeed anyone, had any idea of the horrors that would unfold. 15 million deaths. Another moment of rare idiocy from Mr. Berling. His prediction about the Titanic. It's going to be unsinkable, absolutely unsinkable. He's seen it, he's heard about it, he's read it in the papers. What a boat. Again, more dramatic irony, because we all know what happened. You've all seen the film. If you haven't, and we've just ruined the ending for you, it goes down. It's a watery grave for them all. Apart from lots of the rich folk who managed to get off in their lifeboats that weren't filled up, because they didn't want it being filled up with dirty poor people, as they saw it. But it's very symbolic. The Titanic is a symbol of hubris of perhaps the upper classes, or the British establishment, or the British industry, supposedly grand and the greatest thing ever built, and indestructible, unsinkable in Berling's words. And obviously it wasn't. We all know there she lies. It's an actual Titanic picture on the bottom of the deep blue sea. She sinks on her first Atlantic crossing. Another bit of history which is worth knowing: 1926 was one of the biggest strikes in British history. Millions of workers across the country walk out of work, striking for better paying conditions. So they collectively go on strike and bring the country, the economy, to a standstill. Berling doesn't see this coming either, saying there's a lot of wild talk about Labour. We're not going to have this trouble with Labour. What a load of rubbish. And of course you really did. And I think Priestley has used all this dramatic irony here specifically to maybe speak to two parts of his audience in 1946. Perhaps the upper middle class audience, or more of the capitalist class, warning them not to underestimate the strength of working class unity and solidarity, perhaps, and maybe speaking also to the working class at the time, or the what Marx would call the proletariat, encouraging them to wake up and realize their strength in their numbers, and realize that their collective power when they speak with one voice. Okay. The suffragette movement. So this was the suffrages being able to vote, and so the suffragettes were the females that were campaigning for this. An incredibly heroic movement. They're ignored, they're spoken down to, they are beaten, they're arrested, they're rounded up. For just demanding a voice, demanding to be heard. Incredibly brave, these women. They chain themselves to their railings outside Buckingham Palace. They're imprisoned, they go on hunger strike and refuse to eat, and say, I'm going to starve then, I'm going to starve myself to death, and it's going to be on your watch, and you're the people that arrested me and locked me up. The shame will be on you, because all I want is to speak my mind and equality. Most famously, perhaps, you've got Emily Davison throws herself under the King's horse at the Derby, a famous horse race, as a form of protest, and she dies. It's thought by some historians that she didn't mean to die, she just meant to disrupt the race. She had in her pocket a return ticket to Waterloo, I think, or back to London anyway. And so you wouldn't buy a return ticket if you were planning to die, I guess. So they thought she was just trying to break it up and stop it, but tragically she got trampled. So the suffragette movement is a very significant one, and you need to know about that in relation to Sheila. She's a symbol of the suffragette. She is a young woman who finds her voice. She's spoken down to by her parents. They'd say to us, "You're behaving like a child, you're being hysterical, you're overtired." They patronize her, very, very condescending to her, and they deny her that voice. They speak for her. And she grows as the play goes on. She develops her voice, her identity, her sense of right and wrong, and her sort of has a political awakening. She's a symbol of that suffragette movement, of why women should have a voice, and why it's, perhaps it was high time that they did.
Pressure.